fucking Steve.
So there was a lot of the really, really good thing about big band music is that it's danceable as fuck. Like, it's really, really good music for, like, you know, dancing crazy style on ballroom floors. It's really, really good for that. So it spread really quickly. Like, everyone, you know. Cab Calloway, exceptionally cool guy. In fact, he also kind of invented a thing that will become a huge thing in, like, black music for, like, the rest of time. As long as a couple of other things he might have invented. But he kind of invented singing about stuff being cool. Because you're looking at me like kind of like...
Like, elaborate.
Hi, folks. It's Billy.
And this is Andrei.
And Andrei's looking at me very, very scared right now because he has no idea what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
And awesome, because we're going to get into it in a bit. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really well. A little bit scared, to be honest.
I assume you're scared because of the large page of notes I have in front of me. And the fact
and also proper intro. Welcome to the Billy and Andrei podcast.
Welcome to the Billy and Andrei podcast, people. We've got a good one today. I'm feeling jazzed about this because we're going back into the world of music and we're looking at the 30s, where a bunch of cool shit happened and a bunch of less cool shit but still interesting shit happened. So, shall we just dive straight in?
Yeah, you really want to. Like, I'm not gonna stop you. Like, you came into this one on an extreme high, so you go for it, bro. You go for it, bro.
So, context: 1929. Everybody knows, huge, massive stock exchange crash. Basically, leads into what can only be described as the greatest period of economic uncertainty in the history of humankind. That's why they call it the Great Depression. So, the 1929 thing happened, the stock crash happened for a bunch of reasons, okay? There's a whole bunch of reasons, but mostly the problem was the banks and the people who are sort of, you know, supposed to be regulating all this, like, you know, trade of stocks and shares and stuff, they were all drunk, they were all high on drugs, and they weren't paying attention, essentially. There was not the regulatory safeguards that you have afterwards. So, not as soon as the stock exchange crashes, most of the time when the stock exchange crashes, we don't really notice it. For good reason. It's not our money. In 1929, it was everybody's money because everyone was getting paid in like bonds and shares from their workplace. So all of a sudden, those shares are worth nothing. People start losing their jobs, and because people don't have jobs, people can't buy stuff.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, you get this horrible cycle where everyone's getting poorer. There's no more houses being built, so people are losing their houses and living in tent cities in the middle of the park. Hoovervilles, they were called. So a whole bunch of shit goes bad really quickly in 1929. It was literally like, I've heard it described as the 1920s was a big fuck-off party where everyone was having fun, and the 30s was the really bad hangover that comes the next day.
I would think so. If you like wake up and you don't have a house, and you wake up, you don't have any money, you wake up and all of a sudden nobody has shit.
Nobody has shit, yeah. Your boss can't pay you because your boss doesn't have any money anymore. And there was quite a lot of people, stockbrokers at the time, who just looked at it and just immediately killed themselves. I'm not making that up. They just threw themselves off of high buildings in the middle of New York. It was really bad.
Fuck.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where, like you say, it's like if you sank all your money into Bitcoin and you woke up and Elon Musk had tweeted that Bitcoin was passé or something like that, and then the Bitcoin value just plunged like 99%.
Oh, nobody will listen to it. Well, that's a bad example. Nobody will listen to Elon Musk.
Elon Musk 2 years ago.
No, we get a point. We get a point. Yeah.
So, what does the 1930s look like? Everyone's broke as fuck, basically.
Yeah.
Everyone is broke. That causes some huge problems for music, because music at the time was sort of, you know, the music industry was still kind of growing. And, you know, sales of records were becoming a big thing. Everyone wanted to hear the latest Louis Armstrong record, for example. That became a problem when nobody could afford anything.
Nobody could buy anything.
Yeah, like a lot of stuff got cheaper in the 1930s, like cars and like, you know, TVs started becoming more, you know, a little bit more of a thing, possibly. But like, because everyone was poor, no one could really afford any of this shit. So
nobody had, like, there were the TVs there were the cars there, there were no money to get them.
No money to get them. Yeah. And that became a huge problem for the captains of industry who make their money selling stuff. Because if no one's buying anything, you see how this all becomes a huge debt spiral. Yeah. And so what did happen to music was they become increasingly reliant on the radio. The radio becomes a much, much bigger thing because everyone's already bought radios. And radio transmissions are free.
Yeah. And they were from 10 years ago, radios. So it was like you still would have had that radio in a shack from Grandpa.
Yeah, well, not from Grandpa.
Not from Grandpa, but yeah.
Yeah, you know, you could hand down a radio and it would still work. They were still very simple machines back then. So because of the size of radio, a lot of things sort of changed. So instead of, you know, working for a record label where you just like put out discs like you would do like later on in the 30s, to be honest, instead of being able to do that, people started hosting radio shows. And
when
radio
you say disc, you're referring as in vinyl discs.
Yeah, vinyl discs. Or the shellac. Were they still using the shellac discs? I think they might have still been using the regular shellac ones, which were a bit more fragile than your because regular vinyl you can like bounce it off your brother's head and it'll be fine, you know. These ones they would shatter, so it's a bit different.
Fair enough.
Anyway, what basically happened because everyone was broke as fuck was that a lot of the musicians in bands that were sort of getting by, like in the 20s, like playing in 4s and 5s and little groups like that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they had no money. There was not very many gigs to go round. Live shows were more expensive. They were more exclusive. So all of a sudden, your regular everyday 4 guys jamming in a basement can't like get work anymore.
Yeah, it seems like it's going a little bit backwards.
It feels like it's going to go backwards, but instead what happens is you get big bands. Instead of having small bands that filled small clubs, because, you know, the prohibition's coming to an end, the speakeasies aren't going to be around for very long.
Yeah.
So all these guys who are out of work decided to form into much, much bigger bands, which is why they call this era the big band era.
The big band era.
The big band era. Yeah, because these bands were fucking big. I mean, what's the average number of people in a band these days? Like 4?
4, yeah.
5, maybe?
5. Well, 5, it's a push if you are in a small stage, you know.
Even like big metal bands and stuff. Like, you know, guys like Slipknot who have like a bunch of guys on there to hit beer kegs with sticks for seemingly
But those are, I don't think those are the guys in the band, because they're the band and then those guys are just filler.
Well, try telling them that. The guys in Slipknot would have serious beef with that idea, I think.
I mean, they're pretty much filler, because you got the guy on the drums, you got the guy on the guitars, you got the guy on the keyboards. You have what's his name, Taylor? Can't remember his name.
Corey Taylor on singing.
Yeah, and that's everybody else is just filler.
Well, you've also got like the guy who does the record scratches. You've also got the guy who hits the keg with the with the baseball bat, and the other guy who hits the keg with the baseball.
But
bat.
at the same time, you'll still have a band without those.
You would
guys.
still have a band, but it would be a much smaller band.
Okay.
A lot of the bands. So that's like 9 people in Slipknot, right? Everyone knows how many people are in that band. In big bands at the time, it was usually like about 20 people. They would fill out big ass, like it would be like a little mini concert, you know, orchestra sort of thing.
Yeah.
Very, very brass heavy. Very, 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 very. What's the word? A lot of the songs were sort of pure music. There was no vocalizations over them at all.
Okay.
If you listen to like big band music, usually it's just the band. Like the singing is kind of an accident on the side.
Yeah.
Like, you would often see like. The Benny Goodman band featuring this singer, like this chick from somewhere.
Yeah.
Like a good singer, but they bring her in for like one song and then she'd bugger off. You know, so...
Okay. So is that the beginning of famous people featuring other famous people's things?
Kind of.
I don't know, I'm trying to bring it to this era, right?
No, it kind of is, right? This is where like, you start getting serious, like, featured like credits for the first
it's like
time.
Eminem featuring 50 Cent.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all that shit.
Did he actually ever feature? Never mind.
It's so funny because this will actually link back to hip hop later, and we'll get to it.
Well, in 6 episodes.
No. Trust me, like because the origins of hip hop and a lot of modern stuff, modern musical ideas that we take for granted, came out of a specific fella from this era. So we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Like I said, you also get the birth of what we would call the modern music industry, and the modern music industry is pretty shit. Back then. It was even worse.
Okay.
Most of the guys who ran it were, like, mob guys. There were guys with connections to local clubs which were all run by the mob. So they were all mob connected guys.
So you're telling me they're all
labels.
sleazy as fuck.
They are sleazy as fuck. Yeah, they come from the world of organized crime. And when booze was made legal again in the early part of the 30s, a lot of these guys were like, shit, I can't run my bar anymore because it was illegal and now it's being outcompeted by everything else.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, are making a lot of money off these musicians, so we'll just keep doing that. Yeah. Quite a few of them stuck around, especially in Chicago, which was a huge music. It was a big center of music in the area. Also, because of another fault of the massive stock exchange crash, all the small sort of local music labels that have been putting out people's music and doing recordings and stuff like that.
Oh, they went out of business, did they?
They all collapsed like a motherfucker, and they all merged. So they got into giant mergers, and this is where you get the beginnings at least, of the giant mega labels you see now.
Okay.
Ever heard of the label EMI?
Yes, I did.
That was formed of the remnants of 15 separate music labels in Europe at the time. So they all just went and just merged into EMI, which would last for 100 years. I think it's still around now.
Would you like me to fact check that?
Yeah, do fact check.
You keep on going. You keep on going.
I'm sure EMI is around these days. It's probably owned by Universal or Sony. That just seems to be the case. But how did this change the music, right? So obviously the bands were bigger, and that meant you had a much bigger sound. The jazz stylings of the 20s and that sort of era were very precise. They were very precise in what they did. You'd have a drummer doing one part and a trumpet player doing another part. Now you've got a rhythm section and a horn section, and that has a lot of effects on the music. It makes it bigger, makes it perfect for big live events, which were the only ones that were going on anymore.
So you at this point you wouldn't have big ass amplifiers to make the music. You don't have massive speakers, so that actually helped them perform in front of bigger crowds.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, they were relying entirely on acoustics because the speaker systems at the time were really shit. That doesn't actually get fixed until the 70s.
Fuck.
Yeah, we got a long way to go before, we get the big bass speakers and stuff that we get today. But yeah, the thing with big bands is because there were so many people in them and they were changing constantly as people dropped out or got addicted to heroin or whatever.
Yeah.
Because they were constantly swapping around, everyone was sort of known by the band. They were known for the band's leader. They were, the person who led the band, it was called, Bloody Blah's Band, the Benny Goodman Band, the Duke Ellington Orchestra, Cab Calloway and his orchestra. We're going to get to them in a minute. It was mostly this guy's name, who was the main songwriter and the arranger and the composer.
Yeah.
It was his sort of project. He just had to sort of organize this group of 20 people to get on with each other and play music.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Oh god. Can you imagine the band room drama?
Well, in small bands you get a lot of drama. Imagine when there's 20 people with 20 different opinions.
Yeah. Johnny, the sixth saxophone, is getting off with Brad, the third trumpet player's wife. Stuff like that. I'm sure that shit happened all the time.
Brad deserved that.
Yeah, he did. He was a shit to her.
Yeah, he was. I saw what he was saying to her, so he deserved it.
There's a reason they banned booze. And
Yeah. He's the reason they banned booze, because of Brad. Fucking Brad.
Fucking Brad. Don't get me started on Steve.
Oh.
But anyway.
Fucking Steve.
So there was a lot of the really, really good thing about big band music is that it's danceable as fuck. It's really, really good music for dancing crazy style on ballroom floors. It's really, really good for that. So it spread really quickly. Everyone, the Americans obviously led because it was their idea.
Yeah.
Then the Brits and the Europeans sort of started falling in if we just make these big swing bands, then we'll be just as cool as the Americans. And
but I don't remember any swing bands from Europe.
That's because, there's a reason for that. We might get into it in a bit.
Okay. It seems like I'm jumping the gun this time, Billy.
Yeah, maybe. Don't worry, we'll get there.
Okay.
The only the biggest difference, I think, musically at least, for the big bands versus earlier jazz is they lost the improv spirit,
Yeah. They were organized now, so they were. There's this guy. This is my song. You don't mess up my song. If you mess up my song, you're out of my band. Yeah. My name's on the band. So, Brad, Fuck you, go away.
Yeah. Fuck you, you're being replaced by John.
Yeah.
And like John might be an alcoholic, but at least he's not an opium addict. You sick cat. Anyway.
Sick cat.
So yeah, because they lost the improv, so stuff was a bit more predictable, a bit more sort of stale, if I'm honest. Like a lot of the big band stuff gets stale really quickly, unless it's really good. You know, there's very few guys who can keep you engaged because these songs were long as well.
Yeah.
Like big band music is, you know, average song will be like sometimes like 7, 8, 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And there'll be like different parts of it. So it's very much the prog rock of its day, where everything's a bit too long, and you're like, ugh.
So they're a bit of an Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden got inspired by them with their 9-12 minute songs. Yeah?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, jazz definitely influenced prog. You know, when we get there, we'll talk about it. But like, you know, a lot of the problem people had with prog bands and why there was such a massive backlash against them was because they just kept doing these 12-minute fucking songs and driving everyone.
You get bored
mental.
by the end of it. You're like, you lose the point of it.
Yeah.
And if you try to dance for 12 minutes straight, kind of gonna kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And the one thing that they did have definitely had in common with prog, though, big bands, was solos. So if you've got like a particularly good drummer in your band, or like you've got a particularly good clarinet player or a saxophonist or a guy who's sick on the trombone, that guy might get, you know, you might write in a solo for that guy because it's like, oh yeah, I know Maceo will be able to do this for me.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the times, like, you know, the solos are sort of like the things that break up the songs.
Yeah.
So you'd have these big band choruses, these verses, and then you'd have like some sort of solo to break that sort of rhythm up. Worked pretty well. It was very, very popular. Everyone fucking loved it. And because, you know, it was being distributed for free on the radio, everyone could basically access it still.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, not something you would have seen in the before the invention of the radio anyway. It would have been, you know, very much, you would say that it feels like it's going backwards.
Yeah.
It would have gone backwards if it wasn't for radio.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Radio kept everybody clued in.
Yeah.
You know? Speaking of radio, we're looking at, like, there's one guy in particular, the first black man to ever have a nationally syndicated radio show in America. And he was responsible for another big change and a sort of merging that happened within the big band music scene itself. Cab Calloway. He was a guy from Baltimore. He hustled a lot as a kid. He was like one of those kids who like plays dice in the street.
Yeah,
You know, you might see it in like West Side Story or something like that. He was
Yeah.
one of those kids. His parents were actually pretty well educated. I think his mum was some sort of law assistant or a lawyer. I can't remember. I know his dad was a lawyer because his mum initially told him to stay away from music and jazz and performance and all that stuff because, you know, she didn't think there was any money in it. You know, she have a respectable profession. You should be a lawyer.
Yeah.
He told them to go fuck themselves and kept going to jazz lessons anyway.
I mean, you have to do what you enjoy, right?
Yeah, you do. And he enjoyed quite a lot of things that weren't being a lawyer. Mostly singing, dancing, learning instruments, learning how to write songs, which was kind of tough for like a kid of like 17 or something to do.
Yeah.
But he got very, very good at jazz. He got very, very good at it. And he also played pro basketball for a little while.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Pretty busy kid, huh?
He was a busy kid.
He did everything except for being a lawyer.
Basically, yes.
No, I'll do everything else. Don't tell me what to do.
Literally, I will never do anything else except not be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So he started playing like with other people in the 20s. You know, he was pegged as kind of a talented guy, but he didn't put his own band together until about 1930. And that's when Cab Calloway and his orchestra became a thing.
Yeah.
Cab Calloway was kind of unique because, firstly, most of the time the leaders of the band were like not the most. They'd be out front, but they wouldn't be like the singer or whatever. They'd play an instrument.
Yeah.
I think Benny Goodman was like a clarinet player or something like that. Duke Ellington, I forget what he played. Glenn Miller, was he also? I can't remember what they all played. But Cab Calloway was the only guy who was singing his own songs, writing his own songs for the orchestra. So that meant his music was ever so slightly different, and he could do a lot more what he decided to do was tell stories.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
Cute. He's bringing back the balladeership.
Yeah,
you know?
He's kind of going backwards because if you look at like the big orchestra from back in the day, that's what they did. Like whatever Beethoven wrote, and they all wrote stories in music. So he's kind of inspiring himself from the 1700s, right?
Yeah, about then, yeah.
About there.
I mean, it's also a classical tradition in like folk music as well. Like if you ever hear
or to say a story, that's true.
Like, you know,
in Romanian traditional sort of folk songs, they always hear them sing about this one heroic guy in the mountains killing bears and whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, of course he could kill a bear with his own hands. Have you seen a bear? You cannot kill a bear with your own hands.
I've never tried to kill a bear with my bare hands.
No, wow, dude, the amount of puns in 20 minutes. Can you tune it down?
Bear the thought.
Oh my god. I'm gonna leave. I swear to God. I'll let you finish this one by yourself.
I know you are, but that's fair. I'm used to it. Balladish. Speaking of folk music, though, British folk music in particular has a long history of comedy, and like that's kind of the music that I was raised on.
Yeah.
My dad plays an absolutely mean acoustic rock and roll. He's very, very good at it, and he basically memorized from like just seeing them so much. A whole bunch of like absolutely banging like classic comedy songs. And
I mean, yeah.
One time me and my dad got drunk and he just started telling limericks that he heard from parties back in the day, and he has so many just filthy limericks about men with 18-foot cocks and shit like that.
What's a limerick?
Oh, there once was a man from Nantucket with a knob so long he could suck it. He said with a grin, wiping spunk off his chin, if my ear was a cunt I could fuck it. So they got that rhythm there, you know.
Yeah, I hear, but that I don't know how we're gonna post that.
You could try censoring that out if you get the timings right. Enjoy that one in the editing booth, my friend.
Well, I guess this is not gonna get monetized.
Probably not. Fuck it.
Who cares?
So anyway, yeah, Cab Calloway was like he was kind of like a really, really hyped up like theater kid. He could do basically all of it. Like he could sing, he could dance, he could write music, and he could like I think he acted as well. I think he was in Blues Brothers. He was old as fuck by then, but he was in Blues Brothers for some particular reason. Apparently the director really liked him. So
Blues Brothers, isn't that 1960s?
I don't actually know when Blues Brothers. I thought it was like an 80s movie. I thought it came out in the 80s.
Is it that old? Is it? I thought it was like 1960s one.
It might be, but I'll have to get you to double check on that one, Andrei, because I do not know.
1980s.
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 Yes.
I'm getting good at that googling thing. Oh yeah, and that label you talked about, it got melted down for parts in 2010, and then it came back in 2019 for some reason.
Yeah, it got bought, and then it's a subsidiary of someone.
Yeah,
now,
there's something happened to it. Yeah,
Good,
it's still around.
It is still around.
It's not the same thing, but it's still around. Hey ho.
It's also like interesting that giant companies that own everything like to pretend that they don't own everything, even though they own everything.
Like Disney.
Yeah. It's like, oh well, this is under this umbrella. It's actually under the Lucasfilm. No, it's not. No. You bought them.
It's actually all Disney. It's
all your guys.
The mouse on top.
Yeah,
just ruling everything with an iron fist.
It's just squirrels all the way down.
Yeah, well,
no one's gonna get that unless they watch our shit.
It's fine.
Anyway, so Cab Calloway, he had a kind of a unique path to success, right? I mean, basically, he was the first guy to ever have a soundtrack hit.
Nice,
if that makes sense. He he allowed his music to be used by the people who made Betty Boop.
Oh,
so a couple of like the really early like 30s Betty Boop cartoons, including Minnie the Moocher, The Old Man in the Mountain, and I think there's one called Snow White. All three of those were a big deal in okay, so before they did like classic feature length movies, they usually had like serials, like cartoons, like shorter works on the front of them.
Yeah.
Kind of like Pixar movies. Have you ever seen a Pixar movie in theaters?
I've seen a Pixar movie in theater. Yes, I did. Let's see.
When I went and saw Monsters Inc. for the first time as a kid, my dad, like, there's a short thing called For the Birds, and it's like just a bunch of birds being a dick to this one bird who's a lot bigger and uglier than them.
Yeah.
And they're all the birds get catapulted into space because they like shoved the giant bird off the telephone wire. And it's about 5 minutes long, but it's funny as fuck. And I think me and my dad laughed harder at that than the rest of the entire Monsters.
I mean, Monster Inc. was alright.
It was alright.
It was alright.
But it wasn't a classic, at least not not.
Well, some people do see it as a classic. They did make a second movie.
Yeah, but that's not an indication of quality, is it?
It's true.
I mean, they made 3 of those Star Wars films. I mean, we're talking about the same Disney, so because everything's Disney now.
They made way many more. How many Star Wars movies are there right now?
Oh well, if you include all the extra ones that I don't count. Oh god.
No, because there's the classics. 5. There's the classics, which are great.
Yeah.
And then they made 4 movies?
Well, plus... George Lucas made the first 3.
Yeah.
But the last 3 that were made by Disney and the Solo movie and Rogue One and a bunch of other shit that they
Rogue
made.
One was actually made sense.
Yeah, that actually worked.
That one actually worked. Actually made sense. And then...
it had a sarcastic robot in it, which is perfect.
I mean, that's what we all needed. A sarcastic robot.
We all need that from our Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Everyone forget how much of a dick C-3PO used to be.
He was a dick, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was always less being condescending to everybody.
Can you stop doing... Oh, dude, such a dick.
Sir, the odds of this are ridiculous. No, it's just, well, don't tell me the odds and shut up. You're distracting me whilst I'm trying to get through this asteroid field. You're
making the odds worse.
Yeah.
Because you're talking to me.
Yeah, you're going to shut up. It's going to be worse. Okay, we're getting off topic again. Anyway... So, Cab Calloway had a bunch of really big hits in the early 30s, the biggest of which, and the first record to ever sell 1 million copies.
Oh.
This guy has a lot of firsts under his belt. It was kind of impressive.
It's nice when you're first at the party, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You get all the firsts.
He was the first guy to hit 1 million records, and then he got to brag about that on his first nationally syndicated American radio station. So he had such a big presence in the 30s, man.
Yeah.
It's kind of outlandish. But yeah, Cab Calloway was very, very different from a lot of people because all of these songs, I'm telling you, Minnie the Moocher, Old Man of the Mountain, there's a couple of these other ones, but they all tell a sort of defined story from beginning to end that goes along with the little Betty Boop cartoon that they made. You can find these online. They're very, very cool. I recommend you check them out. They're all on YouTube and shit. It also highlights one of the most creative parts of Cab Calloway's musical output: scat singing. That kind of stuff. He was sensational at it, and it pops up pretty much in all of his early songs. He
just adds a bit of scat in there for no reason.
Yeah, it's like a musician doing a solo.
Yeah.
He's just coming out, and he's just going to go scap over everything and see what happens.
Yeah. And it came out nice.
It came out working great. He had this sort of natural understanding of rhythm and how it's supposed to meld together with the song.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of a scat song or any solo really is you go out away from the main tune, and then you slowly turn, and then you crash back into it.
Yeah.
And if you ever get a really good written solo, you'll notice that they'll do that. Guitar solos, whatever kind of solo.
Yeah.
So he was basically sort of taking all the new elements of jazz and sort of working with, like you said, that old sort of balladeer sort of ship of telling a story. And one of the things he liked to tell stories about was mostly stuff he saw growing up and being a musician in Harlem and New York and all these big cities. So quite a lot. Minnie the Moocher is about a heroin addict. Well, actually, no, it's about a girl who falls in love with a heroin addict and who learns how to be a heroin addict from her boyfriend who's a heroin addict. That's why she's called Minnie the Moocher, because she ends up as a moocher.
Fucking hell.
Dark stuff, but sung with a really happy tone. I don't know how it works.
Everybody was dancing to it.
Yeah.
But they actually don't know what they're dancing to. Outkast? Outkast.
Yeah.
They're doing that. They did that to their songs.
That's true.
Like in most of their songs, they always add a line somewhere that you're like, oh yeah. But actually, if you listen to what they said, you're like, oh, so it wasn't about that.
Yeah. I'm thinking... Well, even what's that one, Roses?
Yeah.
That one has the first line of the chorus is a bit hang on, wait, what the fuck? It's
exactly.
It's this happy, confident song. It's just actually everything smells like shit.
Yeah.
Outcast pick a tone, guys.
Very intelligent guys, those ones.
Yeah, I've got a lot of time for Outcast. They were fucking great.
Yeah, well, they're still out there.
They're still out there. I haven't actually heard anything they've made in the last 10 years.
I mean, when you get that rich, you're fine.
Yeah.
What's the point?
You can just make stuff when you feel like it.
Yeah,
you don't have to make a big deal out of it.
Exactly. You don't have to post an episode every week. for the last 2 months.
To nobody.
To nobody.
Not all of us get nationally syndicated radio stations.
Go on.
Yeah,
Don't let me stop you, Billy.
like you always do. Okay. So yeah, Cab Calloway, exceptionally cool guy. In fact, he also kind of invented a thing that will become a huge thing in like black music for like the rest of time, as long as a couple of other things he might have invented. But he kind of invented singing about stuff being cool. Because you're looking at me like kind of like
elaborate.
So before like the 20s and the 30s, before jazz really, there was no like idea of cool. There wasn't like, you know, well, that guy down the road, he's really cool. Look at him.
Okay.
Like everyone was just, you know, you wouldn't say like disheveled mine workers were not told, you know, turning to other disheveled mine workers and going like, hey man, I dig that crazy fit. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, shit like that was not happening. Everyone was just like, there was no concept of what being cool was because before radio, nobody knew what everyone else was saying.
Okay.
Now that there was radio, all of a sudden people had an idea of what being cool was. You know, it was about
so they defined the terminology as in cool.
Yeah. Well, I think the word cool came about a bit later. They used the word hip.
Hip. Oh, fuck.
which eventually became, you know, turned into a lot. It's still a word we use today.
Yeah.
And
as in hip hop.
As in hip hop. As in, oh, well, that cat's hip. You know, all that kind of stuff you see from the movies, like that sort of jargon, that, what do they call it? There was a kind of slightly racist old word for it. I can't remember it.
If it's racist, it's better you don't.
Yeah, it's an old-timey racist word. But, but we call it today AAVE, which is like the sterilized, you know, African-American vernacular English.
Okay.
Quite a lot of, like, it sort of started a tradition back in the 30s that all of a sudden, like, all the cool black guys in Harlem who were, like, doing jazz concerts and whatever, and probably lots of drugs, they came up with
You mean the hip guys in Harlem?
The hip guys in Harlem, yeah. So you getting it.
I'm getting on the vibe now.
You're getting on the vibe, you crazy cat. But yeah, like, there was a lot of words that were sort of invented in that sort of part of the world, which Cab Calloway thought were really cool. So he was like,
hip.
Thought they were really hip.
Thank you.
So he released, and I'm not going to, one second, I'm just going to check this because I know I've written it down somewhere. He released a book called...
The book was called...
The book was called... It was called...
The book was called... The book was called... It had a cool name. It was a book.
Yeah, okay, I know we're going to cut this out.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll just talk random stuff in the microphone. I do enjoy doing that. And I think I'm starting to not dislike the sound of my voice when I listen to myself for 3 hours every week.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Here we go. Cab Calloway's Catalogue, a Hipsters Dictionary, was the book that he sold. Yeah, he made the first like dictionary of
slang. Show me a picture of his face. Was that his face? You were highlighting something.
That's his face.
He does look hip.
It was a very, very hip guy. That's him when he was a bit older. He was exceptionally stylish when he was younger. So much so that he might have accidentally invented the moonwalk.
Oh, yeah. Michael will not like that.
Yeah.
No, Michael will
Apparently, Michael cited him as a big inspiration, which makes a lot of sense.
Fair enough.
You know,
it's nice if Michael said that it was a big inspiration.
Yeah, I think he did anyway. I mean, I think Michael's main inspiration was not being hit by his abusive father, but there we go.
Or probably, you know, his main inspiration was all the children he was keeping.
Well, we don't know anything about that for sure. Allegedly. Do not sue us, the estate of Mr. Michael Jackson, who's definitely listening to this.
Dude, that's our like 7th listener today.
I would say Cab Calloway was a hugely important guy for like the next sort of like 30 years of music. He was basically always in the background, kind of like Louis Armstrong was. He was always doing something new that people were kind of paying attention to.
Yeah.
He was, you know, he became really enamored and fascinated with the idea of coolness and like, you know, what was coolness and how it's defined and how it changes and things like that. So he basically spent most of his life inventing cool stuff. Just basically,
you mean hip stuff?
Hip stuff. I regret telling you that now. I regret everything.
I
regret doing this episode.
You gave me a gun.
I literally did.
All right. Back to
But
the hip stuff.
Cab Calloway was also like a trendsetter in a different way. Basically, from the like late 20s to like the early 30s, they finally started getting sound in movies properly.
Yeah.
So you start getting like the 30s was big on films, especially like the Universal monster pictures, like modern like Dracula, Frankenstein. Creature from the Black Lagoon was a bit later, but there was a whole bunch of like standard like.
Well, and they had the orchestra, right, as the sound background of it. So
big bands, my friend.
Big bands behind it.
Dracula swoops
that's where Star Wars got Luke got inspired by that. That's why he had such great soundtracks in his movies because of this, I assume.
Well, like they were called Industrial Light and Magic, the guys who did like all the sound and the effects for Star Wars, and they were very, very serious about like making it sound big and impactful. Yeah. I mean, all of the stuff sounded like if you watch a 30s movie now, it all sounds big and impactful because that's like only musical language they had. Yeah, like shit like that.
Oh, it's gonna be a bitch to edit.
just turn it down, it'll be fine. But yeah, so because music was starting to, and actors' voices were starting to play a big role in films, especially like horror films, because they were very, very cheap to make and everyone was broke, don't forget. So music changed in that it became almost permanently marred with film. Like in the 30s, I think you also had stuff like Gone with the Wind. Yeah. Was it Gone with the Wind, or I think The Sound of Music was after the war. No. But you got stuff like Gone with the Wind, and like all the important movie musicals became a thing. Musicals have been around forever, but 1939. Thank you.
I got you.
But yeah, all of a sudden these like huge films are also selling soundtracks. So movie soundtracks also became a thing that you could buy. You could still find old vinyl records from like, oh, here's the soundtrack to Gone with the Wind.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, they do it now, and I love it.
They do it now, and it's great. Like video games do it now, and it's great.
Oh yeah, I like a good video game soundtrack.
I do too. I was going to save this for a later episode, but I've always thought that like the modern sort of orchestra, like Beethoven, like guys like that. Yeah. The modern like classical music tradition. It carries on through video game music.
It does. It does.
One guy sitting down, obsessively writing something, except it's on a computer, not on paper.
Yeah. Well, have you seen, if you listen to the Skyrim soundtrack, it's phenomenal. Like, if you're looking like big band music, that's the biggest band music you can find.
They had a lot of low horns in there.
Yeah. We're not doing it. Okay. Copyright. But also, I think I made you listen to Stellaris' soundtracks.
You did. They were quite good.
They were really intense.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And go on, please, Billy. I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
No, you're not interrupting. It's fine. Right.
I'm not interrupting. It's fine.
Video game music is the way of the future. That we'll leave it at that. Going back to the 30s, though, there was another. We've spoken before about like how usually new music or big events in music happens because of either a technological change or a social change. Yeah. And in the 30s, you had one really big social change happen, which kind of ended up dwarfing the rest of the rest of the century, really. And that was the ever-growing Great Depression fascism movement all around the world. Fascism, yeah. And they were around in the 20s. They were invented in the 20s, but they sort of started to come to power in the 30s. Mussolini's Italy. Yeah. Franco's Spain, to a lesser extent.
Well, he had the Civil War, and then he got deposed.
The Civil War was like, the Civil War went on for a long time. Basically everyone.
Well, everybody sent troops in the Spanish Civil War.
Quite a lot of people did.
Like a lot of countries, they were like, let's just send some troops there.
Yeah, you know who was there? George Orwell.
No way.
Yeah, the guy who wrote 1984. He was there.
Well, I see why he wrote 1984 then. That explains a couple of things.
It does. It explains his burning hatred for the Soviet Union, and I do not blame him for a second.
Yeah. Well, the communists were already up in power now at this point.
In Russia they were, yes.
Yes, Russia, because they were like full on.
It was full on Stalin era. Let's like crush anything good out of the world and put it into a
and
Siberian
they were all trying
mine.
At the same time to expand to different countries around and in big powers, even in the UK and that, but it didn't work.
Yeah, you sort of run out of planet to colonize eventually, and we sort of hit that point in the 20th century. We're like, well, we would expand to fill the rest of the world, but the problem is someone already owns all of it.
Yeah.
So we're either going to have to shoot them, which, we might end up getting shot. Can't have that.
Yeah.
Or we do trade deals and stuff like that, which is, it's slowly sort of getting towards what you would call soft power now.
Yeah.
People are invading each other less and less. One group who's going to break the trend, however, was the Nazis of Hitler's Germany.
Oh, bless them.
Now I've got some notes on this because I read a really interesting article. You can find it. It's called "Hitler's Inconsistent Treatment of Jazz Caused Him to Lose Control."
Okay.
The Nazis had a very, very, shall we say, mentally blocked appreciation of culture. The thing with Nazis is, especially the German Nazis of this time, and you can see it to a certain extent to the lovely people on Elon's Twitter today.
Yeah,
they don't get art. They have never understood art. They could never understand art. All they've been able to do, and you'll find this in like most fascist iconography, most fascist works anywhere in the world, they can only copy. Okay. They can copy stuff. They can't ever come up with something new. Okay. And if they did come up with something new, they wouldn't appreciate it because it's not traditional enough. Okay. So, in terms of creating art, Nazis are just generally shit. If you believe in those certain things, it gets somehow in the way of you creating good art. Yeah. Hitler himself was a mediocre painter who had a terrible sense of perspective. I suggest you look up his watercolors. They're very shit. And you can look at it and go
you can look up his book. That was very shit.
It was very shit as well. Me and Andrei had an idea at the pub last night that we should just do a full reading of Mein Kampf, but every single sentence is done in an insulting voice.
Oh, that's that one. That was at the third pint. Though.
I think the Jews are a problem. If I could get through the whole book like that, I think that would be very funny. But anyway.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Probably not.
She's not going to let us do it.
No. So the Nazis, when they could get into power in the 1930s, one of the first things they did, and I mean this, one of the first things they did was they tried to ban jazz. Yeah. Now, the problem was they wanted to ban jazz and encourage people to listen to traditional German music.
Which was what?
That's the thing. Nobody could tell. Nobody knew where the lines were.
Because Germany their heritage is Germanic, which they are, related to English. And
Germany's only been a country since like 1870 at this point.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking of the people that live there that created Germany. Like, what music do they have? What
in terms of like traditional music? I honestly don't know. I mean, I'd assume they have something.
It's probably something.
They have like Germanic folklore. They have like tales and the Brothers Grimm and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah.
The Grimm fairy tales.
Do the Grimm fairy tales in an orchestra. There you go. But don't do the modified version. Do the original version with the actual proper endings.
Where they all get killed.
Exactly. Let's see how that goes down.
I'm sure someone has done the Brothers Grimm as a ballet or something at some point. I mean,
you reckon?
I mean, it's basically not that different from Giselle, but that's like the only ballet I know. Like, I've watched one ballet once, and it was Giselle performed by the Moscow Ballet on like BBC 4 or something.
Oh, I seen the Nutcracker live.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never took you for a ballet guy.
Yeah, that's why I bought the suit jacket. What do you
that's
think
my special ballet jacket.
It's the only suit jacket I got, man.
That's fair enough.
I looked snazzy in it. I looked hip.
Speaking of people who were trying to ban the entire concept of hip, the Nazis. So, the problem with trying to ban something like jazz is first you have to define what jazz is. Right? Yep. So, compared to traditional classical music, they decided that the thing that made jazz different was the beat. So what they would do is they would have people go to music venues whenever music was playing and make sure to stop it and shut it down if the beat swung too much.
So what? You're going to listen to swing music, and if it's too swingy,
yeah,
you just stop it.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
That's how they tried to enforce this. There was another slight.
But wait. Who was in charge of, how did they know it was too swingy? Is there a certain point when you're like, her hips went 2 degrees in the wrong direction, so that's too swingy, can we stop this swing?
basically they tried to do that. Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, this is the bunch of people who like put you in like Auschwitz for like your nose being slightly too long or the wrong shape.
Oh
so,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, they're idiots.
Yeah, this is the same people that. No,
they're very stupid people.
Yeah. Was that something?
So the problem with that, besides the obvious one of like how swing is to swing, which no one ever figured out, no one ever had a proper like lead on that. But it was done with the discretion of the Gestapo officers, I believe.
Oh, so
basically, if they didn't like you, or you looked at them funny, then you're a Jew. Off you go. Shit like that. The second problem that they had trying to enforce this was the radio. The radio already existed, so and Europe being, Germany is not a large country. It's got some size to it.
Pretty big.
It's not. It's about the same size as most of the rest of the Western European countries. So radio from the rest of Europe could get in there fine. There was no problems. Like they could listen to the BBC over there.
Oh, yeah, true.
Because the BBC, it spent a lot of money on its radio output. It wanted to be able to blanket the world in fucking BBC. That's what it wanted to do. And, to an extent it did. The Germans eventually passed laws against listening to the BBC. Quite a lot of people were arrested because of that one.
I do assume that probably there were like pirate stations at some point.
No, these were official like British like Radio 1 basically. Radio 1's an old industry. But yeah. So the other problem that they had, so this is problem number 3 in their master plan, was their kids all liked it. So all the kids of these Nazi officials kept sneaking out to go to jazz clubs.
So I think that's with most kids. If you tell them they can't have something, they're going to want to have it more.
Yeah.
So it's
especially if you're like the teenage son of like a rich and powerful man. Like, you're not going to tell that guy to say no.
Funny thing is, my mom, she's a genius, right? I used to have a lot of earrings and stuff, and I was hip. I was really hip growing up.
It was the 2000s, man.
And my mom was like, okay. Not even 6 years later, I took everything out, and I'm like, I'm done with this. Been there, done that. But my mom never said, don't do that, don't do that. She's like, okay. I just grew out of it. And so it's like, just let them do something for a little bit.
It's almost as if letting people decide what they want to do with their lives is better for them.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's like, let them make a couple of mistakes. They will learn, and then they will not do them again.
Yeah, the sons and daughters of Nazi officials never learned. They kept sneaking out, and they kept getting in trouble for showing up at jazz events when the jazz event got busted. It was a very persistent problem, and they kept having to try to hush it up. That wasn't the end of their plans, though, so we'll get back to it. Why do the Nazis hate jazz so much? Well, it has to do with 2 reasons. The first reason is Jewish, and the second reason is black.
Both the 2 things that they really hated.
Yes, the things they hated most of the world, and they just decided in their wonderful, funky Nazi conspiracy mind that the reason that black music, jazz music, or the N-word music, as they called it, they weren't subtle, the Nazis. The reason that this music was this unclean music from an inferior race was so popular was because of the Jews. The Jews must be forcing people to like the music that they're putting out.
Was it the Jew magic, wasn't it?
It was Jew magic and banking wizardry and...
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was, yeah.
Literally.
I think there was a book written about this. It was Mein Kampf, was it?
Something like that.
Well, great,
I read it. It was shit. The thing is, like, if people forget this now, because like all we see of the Nazis is in history books, right? Like you see like a few pieces of like, oh, there's a front page. Oh wow, that's propaganda. Look at that. You learn what propaganda is, and then you move on to the next part of the lesson. Anti-Jewish propaganda was literally everything the Nazis talked about all the time. They would not shut the fuck up about, like, literally, like, a bridge would fall down in a village somewhere, the local newspaper would blame the Jews. It was so over the top that it was, like, practically inescapable. These guys were obsessed.
Yeah.
And the reason they were obsessed is because the whole, Jews control Hollywood thing, they started that.
Yeah.
That a lot of people took that one up. It's like, there's lots of Jews in banking. Yeah, no shit, because banking was illegal for Christians to do for like 500 years.
Yeah.
That's on you morons. But they came up with this idea of like, right, so the Jews are using black people to defile other races by sending them into those countries with their music so they can integrate. Basically, they were fucking terrified of black guys coming into their country and shagging white women. That was the thing they were scared of. It all boils down to them being afraid of that.
No, but I'm like...
It's still here to this day.
Yeah,
it still hasn't changed.
yeah.
Those fuckers are still out there.
I can't wait to film ourselves because I'm just going with my head left to right and like, you idiots, you idiots.
You have the look of great disdain upon your face. It's
like,
wonderful to see.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, just...
It all comes back to this fucking clawing insecurity with these like Nazi types. It's always the same thing.
Yeah, well, their leader was a weakling. And
tweaked out fucking scrawny lunatic.
And the worst part of it,
a shit painter.
No, he was a vegetarian. No, I'm joking. That was a joke. Some of my friends are vegetarian, Billy. That was a joke.
Some of my friends have toothbrush mustaches, but actually none of my friends do that because we just laugh at them too much.
That was a joke though.
So anyway, but the Nazis, for all their bluster and their screaming about how all this was degenerate and we should blah 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 blah, all the kids shouldn't be doing this and your daughter's going to get shagged by a black man or some shit like that, none of it worked. Obviously it didn't. People kept going to jazz concerts. People kept playing jazz concerts. The guys in Germany because jazz was pretty big in Germany before the Nazis showed up. So a lot of the guys got a little bit more subtle in terms of how they named their music. So they'd write a jazz song and they named it like Ode to the Classical Germanic Strength of the Nation or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And it would just be a banging jazz song. Yeah. There was the problem was even though they could like unleash the Gestapo upon civilian populations, the one people that they couldn't bully and intimidate was the army.
Did the army listen to jazz?
The army listened to jazz. The army had, traditional sort of army performers, and they'd have like, a band, and of course the Oberführer or whatever would like put a strict like no jazz, no swinging beats on onto the band there. There was one occasion I can't remember. I believe it was an officer something Führer Henkel or something like that. But him and his men, they had like a little sort of private concert. I'm not sure I think this was either just before or during the war. But bunch of soldiers sat out. They were playing like an outdoor concert for them, and the soldiers got bored. So they started calling for jazz songs.
No way.
Yeah, right in front of their officer.
So what, did they actually play jazz songs then?
Well, the guy was too scared to, like, on stage, was far too scared to start playing jazz because, he might get shot. So... But they kept cheering for it. So eventually the commanding officer came out onto the stage and said, "There will be no jazz music." Immediately they started throwing shit at him and calling him a twat. This is a superior officer. There's just a mob of them going,
if the whole mob
off, play some Benny Goodman.
So if it's a whole mob throwing stuff at you, you can't just get all of them arrested.
You can't shoot all of your own men.
You can't have no army, It's like, you can't do that, so...
You'd have to tell them all to shoot each other, and they didn't seem to be in the mood for that, so...
They were probably drinking some strong lagers.
I should hope so. I mean, they're soldiers. They've got to be drunk. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, either that or cocaine.
Yeah. Oh, they were already on a lot of meth.
Yeah, because they did meth. Meth was a German thing, wasn't it?
It was a serious German thing. Yeah, like they were by the time
there was like, here's your coffee, here's your biscuit, here's your meth.
Yeah.
So it's like a daily
ration of fucking massive stimulants. Yeah. So. Which probably explains.
No, that's why they had the biscuits.
Oh, right.
It would calm you down a little bit.
To mellow you after.
Yeah, exactly. Like they make Kellogg's to stop children masturbating. They give biscuits to Germans so they not be too excited for the meth.
Is that true?
Yeah. Did you not know that?
I knew it was given as like to like insane people. Because...
No. So basically, this Colonel Kellogg or whatever was his name in America, he thought that all children are masturbating way too much. And he said that it's because of their diet, so they should have a more plain diet. And him and his wife had this whole thing, and that's why the cornflakes they came out with the cornflakes.
Oh,
well, not just the cornflakes, the brown flakes themselves, because they were so bland. It would not stimulate children to masturbate. Did you never see that documentary? It's a whole documentary, dude, on YouTube about
my
this.
business studies teacher lied to me. I am really upset by this.
Yeah, no, it's like, yeah. We should. Well, I mean, it's a good idea. Just give brown flakes to children, not masturbate, because that works.
Is it, as someone who did eat a lot of bran flakes, it did not work.
You heard it here first, folks. Wow.
So yeah, the Germans were trying to get through, like trying to thread this needle between the fact that jazz is good and everyone loves it, and the fact that it's also made by black people and therefore it's evil. So they were trying to sort of sneak down the middle where they wouldn't piss people off too much, because at the end of the day, if you're arguing against having fun, you're going to fucking lose. So they want to have that argument.
Here's a question which is on everybody's minds. You probably didn't find it on the internet. Did the Nazis actually have a jazz band? Were there a Nazi jazz band? No way.
That's my next point. That's the next thing I'm getting to. It was called it was called Charlie and His Orchestra. And
sounds such a Nazi name. Charlie.
It's like the most basic bitch thing ever. In a minute, I'm gonna tell you what, here might be an idea for a musical sting at this point, so maybe write this time code down.
Where's my pen?
I don't know, dude.
54.
So the Nazis created a jazz band of their own in order to try and, it's like that Tenacious D song, The Metal,
Yeah.
Techno tried to defile the metal, but metal was much too strong. It's very much that. So the Nazis put together a shit jazz band called Charlie and His Orchestra, and they did basically cover versions of like regular like sort of jazz classics, except they changed the lyrics. And when I say they changed the lyrics, I mean they made them Nazi lyrics.
So they made propaganda and jazz.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to that.
Oh, trust me, we will in just a second. Because you'll see exactly why I wanted to put it in here. Guess, just before we play it, guess what the first word that you hear is going to be from this song.
Jews of USA have asked Eddie Cantor to write a new version of his famous old-timer Makin' Whoopee. In one of his latest programs on the air, he sang the following song. Another war, another prophet, another Jewish business trick, another season, another reason for making whoopee. A lot of dough, a lot of gold, the British Empire's being sold. We're in the money, thanks to Frankie, we're making whoopee. Washington is our ghetto, Roosevelt our king. Democracy is our motto, think what a war can bring. We throw our German names away.
There we go. That was a little sample of Nazi jazz music for you. They broadcast this with massive... they tried to broadcast it into England. Quite a lot of these songs were in English because they were trying to propagandize the English. All of this shit didn't work.
Obviously.
The guy in charge of the radio station who was trying to broadcast this stuff into the UK... he was hung alongside everyone else at Nuremberg because he was an evil fuck.
I mean, they were all evil fucks.
They were all evil fucks, but Goebbels, whose idea this was, because he was a head of propaganda, right? Goebbels had already killed himself by the time they found him, so we couldn't swing him up for this fucking awful band either.
Okay, he would, if for anything, would have been for this band. He would have needed this flag. Yeah, that's what you're telling me.
It's like if Weird Al was like evil and also a goblin from hell. You know, it's like it's possibly the worst shit you can imagine. The Nazis waged a massive, massive war against music and fun and everything else, as they are wont to do, The problem is, he just didn't stop anybody. It's like banning booze. The Americans tried to ban booze.
Everybody's been there. Everybody's tried to ban. As I said earlier, stop trying to stop your children to do something, because they will want it more.
Yeah, exactly. So... Like, the Nazis spent quite a lot of time, quite a lot of money, quite a lot of resources, quite a lot of Gestapo officers, I imagine, busting into bands and, like, underground practice places and all sorts of stuff, trying to catch people who were doing the defiling Jewish music. And they didn't win. They just...
nobody's surprised.
Like everything else the Nazis tried, it was a complete fucking failure.
Yeah.
Which is a good and happy note, I think, to end this episode on.
Nazis are shit, jazz is good.
Jazz beat the Nazis.